Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 28th of April of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Moscow, about Russia, because today we have the most important updates from this area. Putin declared a ceasefire for the days of the 80th anniversary of the victory. By decision of Putin based on humanitarian considerations during the days of the 80th anniversary of the victory from midnight on May 7th to 8th to midnight on May 10th to 11th, the Russian side declares a ceasefire. During this period, all military actions are suspended. Russia believes that the Ukrainian side should follow this example. In case of violations of the ceasefire by the Ukrainian side, the armed force of the Russian Federation will give an adequate and effective response. The Russian side once again declares its readiness for peace talks without preconditions aimed at eliminating the root causes of the Ukrainian crisis, constructive international interaction with international partners. So that was stated by the Russians, that was stated by Putin today, and several hours before we got another list, a list of conditions for negotiations. The Russian Foreign Ministry published Lavrov's interview to a Brazilian newspaper. From this list, we can see a clean list of conditions to sit down at the negotiating table with Ukraine. First of all, Kyiv's non-accession to NATO, confirmation of its neutral and non-aligned status, overcoming the consequences of the rule of the neo-Nazi regime in Kiev that was formed as a result of the February 2014 coup, including its actions to legislatively and physically exterminate everything Russian: language, media, culture, tradition, and canonical orthodoxy. International recognition of the Russian affiliation of Crimea, Sevastopol, DPR, LPR, Kherson region, and Zaporizhzhia is imperative. All of Kyiv's obligations must be legally secured, have enforcement mechanisms, and be of an indefinite nature. The agenda includes the tasks of demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, lifting sanctions, lawsuits, and arrest warrants, and returning Russia assets frozen in the West. We will also seek reliable guarantees of the security of the Russian Federation from threats created by hostile activities of NATO, the European Union, and their individual member states on our western borders. So these two statements were made today by the Russians. First of all, we have a list of demands, and the second one is ceasefire. So the Russians are giving the Ukrainians at least 3-4 days to think about this list and to make a decision whether the Ukrainians and Ukraine itself is ready for negotiations. As for now, as for the end of the 28th of April of 2025, let's say more correct, before the beginning of this video, we still haven't received even a single statement from the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, regarding Russian ceasefire and this list. The only thing we have is the request, is the our post and the statement that was made by the Ukrainian foreign minister. If Russia truly wants peace, it must cease fire immediately. Why wait until May 8th if the fire can be seized now and since any date for 30 days? So it is real, not just for a parade. So that was stated by Ukraine foreign minister. So now Zelensky is thinking, and of course the question is what Zelensky is thinking about. And I would like to give you my opinion, my understanding of the situation. The thing is that if you remember, since the beginning of the special military operation, the period of time in the first days of May is a very special period of time for this war between Russia and Ukraine, because during this period of time, since the beginning of the special military operation, both the Russians and the Ukrainians were trying to get their own victory for their own 8th or 9th of May. And this couldn't be anything. This can be just another terrorist attack, for example, carried out by the Ukrainians, which will lead to death of another, for example, highly authority person of Russia. For example, today the Ukrainians reported that Ukraine admitted to the terrorist attack in Balashikha and intends to increase terrorism during the ceasefire. That was stated. The Secretary of Verkhovna Rada Committee on National Security stated this without any embarrassment. So basically, the Ukrainians took responsibilities on killing of the Russian general that took place several days ago. By the way, assassination attempt is the pattern that Ukrainians use always before the beginning of something big. I'll remind you that before the beginning of Belgorod offensive operation in 2023, before the beginning of Ukrainian offensive operation in Robotyne, there were always assassinations of very, very probably important people, not very important, but very popular people of Russian Federation. And several days ago, the Ukrainians, according to the Russians, killed another general. So all these things tell us that the Ukrainians are preparing something. The Ukrainians are preparing something, and most likely this something or Ukrainian plans were revealed during the meetings in Rome between the president of the United States of America and the president of Ukraine. Most likely during this meeting, Zelensky told Trump about Ukrainians' plans for further, probably special operation, maybe offensive operation, maybe Ukraine plans to destroy Crimean bridge for the third time, because Zelensky, he doesn't have power not to provide this information to the United States of America, because if Zelensky prepares something big, he should, let's say, tell about this to the United States of America. He doesn't have, let's say, obligation to tell exact details, but to warn the United States of America that something big is going to happen from our side in the very near future. This is as must obligation of Zelensky. And of course, Zelensky, he knew this when he was talking about this with Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America. And the problem is for Ukraine and for states and for Russia as well, is that the United States of America and the Russian Federation are trying to normalize their relations right now. So that is why the United States of America currently doesn't have the right not to tell the Russians about possible provocation from the Ukrainian side. They don't have this right, because if Ukrainians carry out this any provocation during these May's holidays, and if the United States of America know about this could lead to complete collapse of these relations, and this could lead to probably to exit of this negotiation process from the Russian side. So that is why we believe that this morning, before Putin and before the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation published this list, and before Putin announced this ceasefire, was a call between the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russian Federation Lavrov and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, where they were talking about some productive exchange of views. This is how this call was described. So we believe that during this call, Marco Rubio provided the Russians information that Ukrainians are preparing provocation during the next days, during the May's holidays. And we believe that before this call, the Russian Federation and Putin himself didn't know and didn't plan to announce any ceasefire. But due to this situation, Russians decided to announce ceasefire, because now they understand if Ukrainians begin any offensive operation, for example, offensive operation in the direction of the city of Bryansk, or if Ukrainians begin their offensive operation in the direction of the city of Belgorod, or if Ukrainians attack Crimean bridge with the purpose to destroy it, or if Ukrainians conduct any other provocation, this will be used by the Russians as a, let's say, a real accident, real situation to quit this negotiation process and to start or to reinforce their positions along the entire line of combat contact and to continue the special military operation. And probably the reason why Zelensky still haven't made any statements regarding this ceasefire, at least maybe by the time you're gonna watch this video, he will already made this, but before I started this making video, Zelensky hasn't started anything, which means that most likely he is probably talking with his generals to understand whether they can continue this special operation or special plan or special provocation or not, because this is very important. This is very important for Zelensky, for the United States of America, for Russia, and for peaceful settlement of conflict. So let's wait and see, because if Zelensky today, this upcoming night, accept this ceasefire, then most likely Ukraine is going to change their plans regarding provocations during the May holidays. But if Zelensky refuses to accept this ceasefire, most likely we should expect something big, something terrible during the next several days or even weeks, so during these May's holidays. And most likely the most important thing and the most important target and task for Zelensky is to ruin the parade on the 9th of May, more precisely to ruin the visit of foreign leaders like Xi Jinping, like Modi, like Brazilian Lula, and many Da Silva, many other presidents to Moscow and to the Russian Federation. So this is most likely the most important target for him. At the same time, he can carry out his own parade on the 8th of May with European leaders. So anyway, let's wait and see, but obviously this game has started, and this game promised to be very interesting. Now let's move further and let's go to the line of combat contact. And first of all, let's start with the most important updates. And first, let's talk about the northern part of the Kupyansk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. According to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Kamenka. As you can see, this information was provided us by the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. Today they reported about this, and several hours later the Russians also published this video where we can see how different groups of Russian soldiers were clearing and attacking the settlement of Kamenka from many directions. A lot of episodes how Russian soldiers were clearing buildings, basements, constructions in this area, how the Russians were arresting and capturing Ukrainian soldiers, and many different episodes of the battle for Kamenka. In the final part of the video we can see several episodes how Russian soldiers raised their flags in different parts of the settlement. Later we geolocated at least 3 episodes of this video. One of the flags was established by the Russians exactly above this building. So telling the truth, this is the central part. In this part we have episode how Russian soldiers captured 3 or 4 Ukrainian soldiers that tried to hide themselves in this building. So anyway, based on this video we can see that the Russians obviously control the southern, eastern and the central part, maybe northeastern part. We haven't received even a single geolocation from this video that can give us any update or any insight about the situation in the north and the northwestern part, but despite this we have colored this territory in Russian favor because we have report of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. So the battle for Kamenka has ended or about to be finished, and most likely the Russians then will continue moving further towards the next settlements in the northeastern Kharkiv region. Now let's move further. And first let's talk about the northern Kupyansk direction. There are very heavy clashes in the northwestern part. We continue receiving different videos how the Russians are trying to destroy Ukrainian positions, most of all mainly trying to destroy the FPV drone operator bases, but without any changes. At the same time, several pro-Russian very reliable resources reported that the Russians began another offensive operation from the settlement of Ivanovka in the western direction, and as a result of this fast lightning attack, the armored force of the Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Stepova Novoselka. So this village was taken by the Russians, and according to several pro-Russian resources, this is approximately the territory that is already under complete Russian control. The Russians are not planning to stop according to this article, and the Russians are planning to move further in the direction of the settlement of Northern Peshchana and Petropavlovka. So the news around the city of Kupyansk obviously is tightening. Now let's move further and let's talk about the southern Kupyansk direction or the Liman direction, where the Russians also continue their offensive. In comparison with the previous video, we haven't received too many updates. I'll remind you that the latest update we have is that the Russians managed to establish or improve control, improve their positions around this flower, the flower of Katerinovka, Novomikhailivka, or the flower of Liman direction. The Russians took under control several important strategical positions, and the Russians continue offensive operation further in the direction of the settlement of Kolodezi, and according to several, let's say, updates, the Russians have already entered the northeastern part of this village. Furthermore, the Russians managed to outflank the settlement of Nova and answer the village of Lipo from the southeast, and the Russians continue advancing in the fields, trying to get as close as possible and to attack the settlement of Grekovka from behind. Obviously very important advances. At the same time, we have several videos where we can see how the Russians were bombing and attacking the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of the settlement of Redkadub and on the territory of the settlement by the name of Cherneshina. So we see Russians continue their offensive. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Siversk direction, where the Russians most likely resume their attempts to establish complete control over this territory. Another day brought us another video of TOS flamethrower system in action. In this video we can see how the Russians were bombing and pummeling the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of the Serebryanka forest. So almost every single day we get another video of how the Russians try to attack and to destroy another Ukrainian position. We see that the Russians intensify their activities and their offensives, and we believe that the Serebryanka forest will be taken by the Russians, or at least some huge part of this forest in the northern and eastern and the southeastern parts would be taken by the Russians. At the same time, we start receiving first geolocations that confirm the presence of the armored forces of the Russian Federation on the territory of the eastern part of Grigorovka. This is exactly the moment I'm talking about. The Ukrainians attacked with FPV drone the basements where most likely the Russian soldiers were hiding. So this area was attacked by the Ukrainians, which means that everything to the east and southeast is already under complete Russian control. At the same time, the Russians continue clearing the passage in the way to offensive and to attack further in the western direction. In this video, we can see how Russians were bombing and attacking the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine to the southeast of Grigorovka. Most likely, the Russians will try to advance further and to attack the village from the south and try to outflank the village from the southwest. At the same time, the city of Siversk is under very heavy fire because Ukrainians currently try to regroup to introduce additional reinforcements and reserves that could be used further to counterattack and to stabilize the situation along the line of combat contact in this area. The Russians control the situation. They establish complete control over the city with a significant number of drones, and as soon as they see anything moving, the Russians began acting. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Konstantinovka direction, where most likely, and according to updates we have, the Ukrainian defense is about to collapse. First of all, let's talk about the city of Chasiv Yar, where the Russians, telling the truth, are finishing the battle for the citadel. Today we got another video how the Russians were attacking this citadel with TOS flamethrower system. It's very difficult to imagine who can survive after such a pressure. At the same time, the Russians control the territory with drones, and today we start receiving first reports that Ukrainians began retreating from the citadel, trying to save their servicemen in the direction of Mykolaievka. So we expect that before the ceasefire starts, the Russians will establish complete control at least over the central part. But due to this announcement of ceasefire, now we change our projection. We believe that the Russians will not be able to establish control over the city of Chasiv Yar by the time, but they will improve their position significantly. At the same time, the Russians, according to different sources, entered the village of Stupachki. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the southern and southeastern Konstantinovka directions. As you can see, for the first time probably since the beginning of Russian activities in this area, we haven't received almost anything, just small changes, small attacks, and that's it. Now let's talk about the eastern Pokrovsk flank. We have updates. The Russians began offensive operation. The Russians currently are trying to improve their positions in the direction of Malinovka. This information was confirmed by several reliable pro-Russian resources. The Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of N32 road. As for now, according to different geolocations, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Berezovka. We have proofs, we have geolocations, we have videos that confirm the presence of the Russians in this area. And also this information was confirmed by different mappers. So as for now, pro-Ukrainian sources haven't confirmed anything, but we see, according to these icons, according to these events, that the Russians are trying to take something like this before the Russians continue further offensive in the direction of Novopoltavka, Malinovka, and the city of Novoekonomichna. When talking about the city of Pokrovsk, the Russians continue bombing and reducing to ruins the southern citadel. Since the beginning of this year, we got already tens of icons, of videos, of geolocations of how the Russians were bombing this part of the city. This is the strongest part of the city, which is under complete Ukrainian control, which means that most likely the Russians will not try to attack the city from the south, but as for now they can attack this territory with the purpose to destroy as many as possible buildings, which will also lead to probably collapse of Ukrainian, at least the defense positions or their intelligence positions in these high-rise buildings. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Bogatyr direction. And we see, according to all these geolocations, that the Russians are trying to establish complete control over the settlement before the beginning of May holidays. Today we got another batch of videos and we see that the Russians are using everything heavy they can. Everything heavy caliber was used in this settlement, and the Russians are continuing to intensifying using of everything they have. In this video we can see how this small village was attacked by multiple launch rocket systems from too many times. Almost every single building and the construction in this video was already damaged. The Russians in this episode using, as you can see, TOS flamethrower systems. The Russians control the settlement of Bogatyr with drones, FABs, everything is flying in this direction, and the reason of this is Ukrainians have too strong position. The Russians since the beginning of April and March made probably dozens of attempts to enter the southeastern part of the settlement, but as for now without any changes. The Russians are still on the outskirts of Bogatyr, and this is very tough nut. Furthermore, the Russians decided to change their tactics a bit, and today we got this video. And in this video we can see how the Russians decided to destroy, after dozens of attempts to attack the settlement of Bogatyr, just now the Russians decided to destroy bridges and logistic that Ukrainians used to supply their forces on the territory of this stronghold. In this video we can see one bridge was destroyed in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Dachna. This is exactly the place. And in this video we can see the second bridge that was destroyed also by the Russians. If we go back, if we return to map, we're gonna see all these bridges. So this is the second episode of the video. This bridge was destroyed, and this is the first episode of video we've just seen. This is the first bridge that was destroyed by the Russians. It's very difficult to understand whether the Ukrainian logistic will collapse or not, but obviously their capabilities will be reduced. Anyway, despite the fact that Ukrainians hold their positions and hold their lines, we see that the Russians advancing very slowly, step by step. They continue improving their positions and getting closer and closer to the village itself. As for the South Donetsk direction, during the previous day we haven't received anything additional, just video we have already discussed, where we can see how the Russians were dropping some applications or lists suggesting Ukrainians to surrender. As for now we don't have more proofs to confirm whether Ukrainians return control with this territory or not. As for the Zaporizhzhia direction, as you can see, during the previous 24 hours we got lots of important updates. The Russians intensified their activities, their FPV drone attacks, artillery strikes. They try to destroy as many as possible positions, fire positions, anti-tank positions along the border of the settlements of Novoandreevka, Novodanilovka and Orekhov. So it seems that the Russians are preparing themselves before the beginning of assault operation in this area. But as for now, as for today, without any changes on the ground. As of now, there are still a lot of job to do until the Russians will have possibilities to do anything. And of course, let's continue with the city of Kherson and Kherson direction. I'll remind you that according to Russia's demands, Kherson is a part of the Russian Federation, and Ukrainians should abandon this region if they want to sit with the Russians at the same table and to begin negotiations. As for now, we see the Russians continue bombing the city of Kherson itself, and according to several articles, several updates that were published today by several very reliable pro-Russian resources, the armored forces of the Russian Federation crossed the river of Dnipro, landed on the Ukrainian side, and currently there are very heavy clashes for the settlement of Kamenka. This information today was confirmed both by the Russian resources and by Ukrainian resources, but as of the end of the 28th of April, without any geolocations or, let's say, changes or videos that can confirm this. Obviously, if this information is correct, this is something unbelievable. We know that Ukrainian attempt to do the same in November, December and January, February of 2025-2023 led to significant losses from the Ukrainian side. We are talking about the Battle of Krinky. Now the Russians are doing the same, but on the Ukrainian side of the river. Maybe the Russians have some plans, maybe the Russians improve their technologies and they know that they have more chances for this operation. Anyway, let's wait and see, but obviously this looks like very strange to me. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.